And if someone does attempt to interfere with your property rights, no matter what kind of property you own, they may be civilly or even criminally liable. That's because your exclusive rights are sacred under the law, and several very different kinds of laws have been specifically designed to help make sure that no one interferes with your exclusive property rights, whether those rights are in your house, your car, or your music. And if they do, that you are always left with some kind of legal recourse.
There's someone you should know.
Hey everybody, welcome to the BOM Podcast. BOM stands for Business of Music Bootcamp, which means that this is the place where we will drill down on the business and legal aspects of the music industry. Everything from copyrights and contracts to policies and practices. Whatever it takes to educate and empower you with the knowledge you need to make informed decisions about how to protect yourself and your music is what you'll find on the BOM. I'm your host, Professor Butler, and as a retired entertainment attorney, former record label executive, music law professor, and college administrator, I have counseled thousands of artists and musicians on the intricacies of the music business. Now it's your turn.
The information in this podcast is not intended, nor should it be construed as legal advice. If you have questions of a legal nature, we strongly recommend that you contact an attorney in your local jurisdiction who specializes in music and/or entertainment law. For guidance, check out our website at professorbutler.com and sign up to receive a free resource on how to find the right lawyer for you. And now, your host of the BOM Podcast, Professor Butler.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the BOM Podcast, episode number 8. I'm your host, Professor Butler, and in this week's episode, we're going to talk about intellectual property. Actually, we're going to discuss property in general and end up taking a look at the 4 primary types of intellectual property, which are patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. The reason I'm doing this subject today is because after 16 years of teaching entertainment law and the various forms of intellectual property that affect the music industry, I quickly figured out that if you don't fully understand what it means to own and control property, any kind of property, then the concept of intellectual property might not sink in. Now, this is the part of the show where I remind you that the sole purpose of this podcast is to provide to those of you who are artists. You may be a singer, songwriter, musician, producer, you name it, with the business and legal knowledge you need to protect yourself and your music. That's why I teach about property, and I start off talking about the different types of property, including the exclusive rights associated with property ownership and the various laws created to protect those rights. With that said, let's start off with a little story. This is the story of a musician by the name of Kim. Kim is a guitar player from Cincinnati, Ohio. She's a woman of simple means. She has a healthy savings account. She owns a few stocks and bonds. She works as a session player and gives guitar lessons on the side as a way of supporting her husband and her 2 daughters. She owns her own home, and it's a really nice house with a built-in skylight. She owns a car and a minivan. Her basement is where she keeps her recording equipment, her keyboard, and her 3 guitars. Kim is also an accomplished songwriter who has already released 2 EPs. She's currently working on her first full-length album. Now, you might be thinking, so what's this story all about? Well, there are a lot of little details here that you really don't have to remember, but I will emphasize them as they become relevant. I just like having a story so that we can put things into perspective. And the purpose of this story is to highlight the various forms of property under Kim's control. So exactly what is property? Basically, anything that can be legally owned by either an individual or an entity like a business or a corporation can be considered property. Whatever kind of property it is will fall into one of two categories. It's either going to be real property or it's going to be personal property. Everything that can be owned will fall into one of these two categories. And regardless of the category, the one thing that all forms of property have in common is something called exclusivity. Before we dive into exclusivity, which is the exclusive rights that all property owners possess, and the various laws that protect those exclusive rights, let's talk a little bit about the different kinds of property so that we can get to know how you and Kim can protect whatever property belongs to you. The first of the two main types of property is called real property. Basically, real property is what most of you know as real estate, and real estate is really just land. But real property is more than just the land. It includes the building, the structures, and whatever else is permanently attached to the land, as well as anything permanently attached to what's permanently attached to the land, which we call fixtures. Real property is tangible and it has an element of permanency. In other words, real property cannot be moved. It is always in the same physical location. It cannot be moved or relocated. You can't move the land. You can't just up and move what's attached to the land, nor can you move what's attached to the land. This includes anything growing on the land's surface or anything that exists below the surface. This is why when you move out of a house, you might take your furniture, but you wouldn't ordinarily take the landscaping, the toilet, or the sink. Those things are a part of the land. They're a part of the real property, and they're not meant to be moved or taken with you when you move out. Of course, unless it's some sort of custom gold toilet or something like that. And if that's the case, you would just replace it with a regular toilet. So anyway, when we take a look at what Kim owns, we said she owns her own home, right? Which probably means that she owns the house and the land that the house is sitting on, as well as anything permanently attached to the house, which includes her beautiful skylight and any other permanent fixtures. Now, the rights that Kim possesses are all part of that real property ownership, which includes these exclusive rights. Number one, the right to possess and control the property, which means that when you own real property, you have the right to own it and to determine who steps foot on it, right? And how it's used. Number two, you also have the right to use and enjoy the property without substantial interference from other people, which means when you own real property, this is why you can call the cops if your neighbor is too loud with their music late at night, or you can even prevent your neighbor from adding an addition to their house, which might obstruct your view because you have the right to enjoy and use the property that you own. Number three, you also have the right to transfer or sell that property, which means you have the right to sell it anytime you want, or even transfer it by leaving it to someone in your will. Finally, number four, you have the right to exclude and prevent others from doing any of the aforementioned things on or with the property, which means that no one can do anything with your property or on your property without your permission. It's these exclusive rights that really form the basis of property ownership, no matter what kind of property it is. It's what we mean by exclusivity. Exclusivity means, or is defined as to exclude, not allow, not divide or share, or not to include others. When you purchase real property, your right to possess and control, to use and enjoy, to transfer or to sell, and to exclude others are all exclusive rights, meaning that you are the only person, right? You, as the owner of the real property, are the only person who can exercise those rights, and that no one else can do any of those things that we just mentioned without your permission. And if someone does attempt to interfere with your property rights, no matter what kind of property you own, they may be civilly or even criminally liable. That's because your exclusive rights are sacred under the law, and there are several very different kinds of laws that have been specifically developed and designed to help make sure that no one interferes with your exclusive rights, whether those rights are in your house, your car, or your music. And that if they do, you are always left with some kind of legal recourse. When we say legal recourse, what we mean is that there are laws that protect your property. For example, some of the laws or crimes against real property include things like burglary, which is the unlawful entry into your home or other closed structure, often by force or coercion, with the intent of stealing property or stealing something from the property or committing some other crime. Arson is the intentional burning of almost any type of structure, building, forest, or even land. Vandalism, another crime against real property, occurs when an individual destroys, defaces, or otherwise degrades someone else's property without their permission. And trespass involves entering an owner's land or property without permission. There's also something called criminal trespass, which involves entering or remaining in place when you know that you don't have permission, license, or privilege to be there. So these are just a few of the crimes against real property. And when you acquire the property, you acquire all the rights and the automatic protection of the law. Personal property works exactly in the same way. Basically, all property that's not real property is personal property. Personal property is movable, it's portable in that it can be moved from one place to another. It is not attached to or associated with anything immovable or permanent. This includes physical possessions of virtually every kind, so long as they can be moved and owned by an individual or a legal entity like a business or a corporation. Therefore, our guitarist, Kim, she owns not only real property, right, her home and the fixtures attached to the home, she also owns personal property, which is basically everything else in and around her home, all the furniture in the house. It includes her car, her minivan, her recording equipment, her keyboard, her 3 guitars, and even the clothes on her back. Personal property is tangible. It's a physical object that can be seen, touched, and felt. Tangible personal property is also known as chattel, and chattel is like an old school term, which basically means any personal possession that is not real property or attached to real property. However, there are some forms of personal property that are intangible. Remember, Kim owns a savings account. She owns stocks and bonds. Now, they may or may not be tangible, but they're still considered personal property. And personal property, just like real property, enjoys the same or similar exclusive rights. The right to possess and control it, the right to use and enjoy it, the right to transfer or sell it, and the right to exclude and prevent others from doing anything with it or to it without your permission. There are even crimes against personal property because personal property is protected by the law. Larceny, for example, is the taking of something of value without consent and with the intent to permanently deprive the rightful owner of the object. Most states use the term theft instead of larceny, but larceny is basically just theft. Another law that protects your personal property is robbery. Robbery exists by using force or the threat of force to take something of value from another individual by either pointing a gun at them, like a bank teller, and demanding cash, or just carjacking somebody off the street. Shoplifting is the theft or concealment of merchandise from a retail establishment without the intent to pay for it, such as placing items in your pocket and walking out of the store, right? Because that protects the entity's personal property. All of the merchandise that they own is their or the company or the store's personal property. And then there's motor vehicle theft, which includes the theft or even attempted theft of a motor vehicle. And a motor vehicle can be any self-propelled vehicle that runs on land and not on rails. For example, SUVs, sport utility vehicles, cars, trucks, buses, motorcycles, motor schools, ATVs, all-terrain vehicles, and even snowmobiles are considered to be motor vehicles. So all of these things are your personal property. And fortunately, there are laws in place that protect that property. So Kim, right, from Cincinnati, owns quite a bit of personal property. Her car, her minivan, all of her equipment, etc. The only issue with the cars and the instruments and the equipment, however, is that they are all physical items. What about the other things that Kim owns? Remember the songs I said she wrote? I said she was a prolific songwriter. She recorded 2 EPs. She's working on a new album. What about those things? Because those things are generally not tangible. Her songs are on the streaming services, so they're on Spotify and Apple Music, right? Very often, she sells her music on her website in the form of digital downloads, but you can't see a stream and you can't touch or feel a download. So how do you own something that you can't see, touch, or feel, something that is intangible? Well, luckily, personal property comes in 2 forms: physical or tangible objects, also known as chattel, as well as intangible objects, such as ideas, designs, concepts, inventions, artistic expressions, and all things digital. Anything that you create, you own. But it's not just the things that you create with your hands, right? It's also the things you create with your mind or your intellect, like your songs, your music, and your recordings. And the things that you create with your mind or your intellect are what we call intellectual property. Intellectual property is the intangible part or the intangible subset of personal property. It includes things like brand names, logos, slogans, discoveries, formulas, inventions, designs, software, creative expressions, and works of artistic, literary, or, in our case, a musical nature. Intellectual property is one of the United States' biggest exports and one of the most readily tradable properties in the digital marketplace. So when we talk about intellectual property, we're talking about the things that we invent. We're talking about our brands. We're talking about our movies and our music, right? All of those things are what we consider to be intellectual property, but there are 4 basic types of intellectual property that all of those things fit into one of these 4 categories. The first is patents. Now, patents give the inventor, or give you, the exclusive right to make, use, or sell an invention, a design, or a process. Whatever it is you invent or design, it has to be new, novel, non-obvious, and useful or utilitarian, meaning whatever it is you invent, right, has to be useful for some sort of work or have some other purpose. You can stop others from doing anything with your invention until the patent expires, which is in about 20 years from the date that you complete the invention. Even if you never make or sell the invention, you still have a 20-year monopoly over who uses it. And there are several different kinds of patents too. There are utility patents, design patents, plant patents, etc. And they each protect a different type of invention. Patents cover everything from your clock radio and your washing machine to newly engineered plant species and the eventual cure for coronavirus. Trademarks are distinctive words, images, their phrases, symbols, sounds, smells, and even color schemes that identify a product, a service, or what we call a brand. Trademarks must identify specific goods or services or they can even just identify the company that supplies those goods and services. And they have to be unique and distinctive enough to distinguish those goods and services in the marketplace. Because trademarks are also used to prevent what we call consumer confusion, meaning your mark cannot be the same as my mark, because if it is, people will be confused. McDonald's, for example, one of their marks is the Golden Arches. It identifies the goods and services of the McDonald's Corporation. And I talked about this in a previous episode, but if you open a hamburger shop and use the Golden Arches as your brand, your mark is obviously not distinctive or unique because I already have that mark. And if you got two hamburger joints with the same mark, people could be confused, and that means that they may get something that they weren't expecting or didn't pay for. So that's why trademarks are so important. They may be registered or unregistered, and they may last as long as they are in active use. So examples of trademarks are the MGM Lion Roar, the orange color scheme that Home Depot uses, the logo for Intel inside, the Nike swoosh, and like I said, the McDonald's Golden Arches. McDonald's has a few marks too. They have the Golden Arches. They have the slogan, I'm loving it. They have the name McDonald's. All of those things are part of their trademarks. The next very popular form of intellectual property, which we talk about often in this podcast, are copyrights. Now, copyrights don't protect ideas. That's mostly for patent inventions, designs, and processes. Rather, copyright protects how you express an idea. Copyright protection covers original, fixed expressions, right? Not ideas, but expressions of ideas that are non-utilitarian, meaning not useful for work. So, in other words, something that you've created that doesn't have a utility aspect to it. In other words, it's not good for work, it's not particularly useful, but it's still important because its artistic expression is protected by copyright. So copyright covers writings, art, software, choreography, architectural drawings, plays, scripts, photographs, logos, and for our purposes, music and sound recordings. And with certain exceptions, because there are exceptions to every rule, copyright allows the owner of the protected materials to control the reproduction, the distribution, the making of derivatives, new versions or adaptations, public performance, and public display of the works they own. So copyright is one of those that really delineates what your exclusive rights are, but still, it's intellectual property. So the property rights are still very similar to every other form of property. There are just additional property rights associated with copyrights. Finally, there's trade secrets. Now, trade secrets are interesting because they're pieces of information like a secret recipe or a proprietary process or technique that gives a business an advantage over its competitors. The information is valuable specifically because it's a secret. It's not widely known. And if someone were to steal it and disclose it, it would decrease the value of their product and even completely destroy the value of the product. For example, well-known trade secrets are like KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken's Colonel's secret recipe, right? Or Coca-Cola's formula. They give them, or those secrets, give the company a competitive advantage in the marketplace. If anyone knew the formula, then they would copy the formula and all chicken would taste the same and all soda would taste the same. So what they do is, in order to obtain a trade secret, it's really important that you just keep whatever it is a secret. You don't have to file anything. You don't have to register anything. You don't have to fill out any paperwork. You just keep it a secret. And of course, there are laws that will protect your secret if it's ever divulged. All right. And speaking of laws, there are laws that will protect your intellectual property, just like there's laws that protect your real and personal property. Because remember, with intellectual property, you have certain exclusive rights. And we want to make sure that you are able to exercise those rights and even to monetize whatever it is that you have created. So there are laws in place that will help to enforce your rights. When it comes to patents, patent law is codified in Title 35 of the U.S. Code. Patent law is also authorized by the United States Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8, which is a big deal. You don't have to memorize it, but I still kind of have to, which means that Congress shall have the power to promote the progress of science and the useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So in other words, Congress created laws, right, which were dictated by the Constitution to make sure that you have exclusive rights in your intellectual property. Patent law is designed to encourage inventors to discover their new technology, right, and to disclose it to the world by offering them an incentive of a limited time monopoly on the technology. Because can you imagine if you invent something and then the next day somebody come along and use it and you spent years developing it and never really got paid for it or never made the money off of it? That would de-incentivize you from creating anything ever again. So that's why we have patent law, which encourages you. Hey, if you create something, you'll get, a 20-year patent on whatever it is you create, which will give you the opportunity to exploit it and to make your money back. Utility patents, right, for example, are the ones that have the term for about 20 years. And the 20 years starts from the earliest patent application filing date. So in order to get a patent, you have to file an application. After the patent term expires, the new technology then enters the public domain and is free for anyone to use. So you had your monopoly, now it's in the public domain, anyone can use it. Trademark also has laws that protect it. Now, trademark laws are governed by both state and federal law. The United States trademark law, however, is mainly governed by Title 15 of the U.S. Code, also known as the Lanham Act. There is common law trademark at the state level, and those rights are acquired automatically, right, whenever a business uses a name or logo in commerce, and are enforceable in state courts. So you don't have to do anything to acquire a trademark except for using the mark in commerce, in the marketplace. That way you are automatically entitled to common law protection at the state level. Marks that are registered, however, with the United States Patent and Trademark Office are given a higher degree of protection in federal courts than are unregistered marks. However, both registered and unregistered marks are granted some degree of federal protection under the Lanham Act, which was enacted in 1946 and most recently amended in 1996. Okay, little history lesson here for you, don't hurt. The third type of intellectual property, copyright, is also protected by law, and it's also authorized by the U.S. Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8. U.S. copyright law, right, was generally last revised in the Copyright Act of 1976, and it's codified in Title 17 of the U.S. Code. The United States Copyright Office is the one that handles copyright registration, recording of copyright transfers, and other administrative aspects of copyright law. And remember, copyright law protects 8 categories of original, fixed, artistic expressions. Those 8 categories are literary works, and I'm doing this by memory, so forgive me. Literary works, dramatic works, things like plays and scripts, architectural works, choreographic and pantomime works, also protects pictorial, graphic, and sculptural works, that's your art, It protects musical works, sound recordings, and motion picture and audio-visual works. And all of those works are entitled to the same exclusive rights or bundle of exclusive rights: the right to reproduce, the right to distribute, the right to make derivatives, the right to publicly perform, and the right to publicly display. Lastly, there's the Uniform Trade Secrets Act, the UTSA, which protects trade secrets. And it was published by the Uniform Law Commission, the ULC, in 1979 and was amended in 1985. The Uniform Act, right, was created because each state kind of had its own trade secret law. So they created the Uniform Trade Secrets Act in order to bring all of those laws together. The primary goal of the UTSA was to make the state laws governing trade secrets uniform, which is really important for companies that operate in more than one state. And the UTSA is the one that defines what a trade secret is and also describes particular claims that can be brought related to trade secrets. All right, so each of these federal statutes, right, provides a different set of exclusive rights to the owner of the patent, the trademark, the copyright, or the trade secret. It's not necessary that you memorize these laws. I don't even have them memorized. But it is important to know that they exist, right? For this reason. It's really important for you to know when you own a house, what laws exist that will protect your house. When you own a car, it's important to know that if somebody takes your car without your permission, right, that you can call the police. Well, it's the same case when it comes to your intellectual property. If you don't know what you own and you don't know what laws protect what you own, it's much easier for somebody to take or steal or otherwise exploit what you own. So it's important that you know that these laws exist and to understand the extent to which they protect your exclusive rights. All right, that one was kind of fun. A little bit of a history lesson there, but I hope and pray that it was useful. So what did we learn in this week's episode? Well, we learned that there are two main types of property: real property and personal property. We learned that personal property may be tangible, chattels, or intangible. We learned that one form of intangible personal property is known as intellectual property. We learned that there are four main types of intellectual property: patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. We also discovered that all property, be it real, personal, or intellectual, is protected by various applicable laws that are designed to enforce your exclusive rights in whatever kind of property it is. And lastly, no matter what kind of property you own, you have the right to use it, sell it, and control it to the exclusion of all others. All right. Well, that's it, everybody, for episode 8 of the BOM Podcast. I hope you enjoy these podcasts as much as I do. I really do have a lot of fun doing this, doing the research, preparing the material so that I can convey the most accurate information I possibly can. So please feel free to leave a comment, even a question. Visit my website at professorbutler.com. Don't forget also to tell a friend. And I'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me on the BOM Podcast. If you were educated, empowered, or inspired by what you heard, please subscribe today to be the first to receive the latest episode. And don't forget, post a review, tell a friend, follow me on social media, and join my tribe at professorbutler.com.